the questions are asked about the side on the losing side in that match. For Manchester United, 2 of Jose Mourinho's signings started the game. There were 3 on the bench. Do you think Manchester United are spending wisely?
Well, you'd have to say no, wouldn't you? I mean, you've only got to look at the 2 centre-halves, Lindelof and Eric Bailly, 2 Mourinho signings that he seems to have... I know Lindelof played at the weekend, but he seems to have almost discarded them mentally, and hence all the fuss about getting in some more central defenders in the summer. But they've spent an awful lot of money, not much less than City over recent times. What is it, about 400 million? And what have they got to show? And I do think Graeme Souness made the point on Super Sunday that I don't think he's getting the best out of that group of players. It's a hugely talented group that should be doing much better. And you look at people like Rashford and Martial. Until recently, he wasn't doing it. Obviously, Sanchez has hardly kicked a ball in anger. These are players that are standing still,
well,
sometimes
there's
going
no coincidence.
backwards.
You've mentioned very offensive players.
Yes.
Mata, Sanchez, Martial, Rashford to this world that don't seem to be playing on a regular basis because he's a very defensive type coach. Now, it wouldn't suit me if I'm a Rashford, getting pulled in and out of squads all the time. What's my best position striker? A wide player. Sanchez is not getting the best out of him. And Pogba, who wasn't even in the squad, he was injured. And remember, he's £100 million worth. So it's one of the easier things in football is to be defensive. You can set up an average side and make them very good defensively. The hardest thing in football is to be offensive. And Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp are fantastic at it. That's the hardest thing in football, is to try and score goals and to attack. It really is. And Mourinho thinks it's easier for me to... And he's getting the best out of Young. He's getting the best out of Shaw. He's getting the best out of average defenders. But defensively, not offensively.
But defensively, they're appalling, aren't they? I mean,
well, he's complaining about it,
fifth best.
But he signed Lindelof and he signed Bailly.
But they've got a negative goal difference. They've let in 21 goals already this season.
But that's better last season, Jason.
That means he's not doing
they
the
were
job
good
properly.
last season.
You can't get the balance right between attack and defence, can he? That's
Well, I think Graeme Souness made a great point when he's saying, is he getting the best out of what he's got? Now, if you're the owners of the club or the chairman, you've got to say, first of all, get the best out of what you've got, and then you can add to it. You're not getting the best out of what you've got, then you're going to struggle.
I mean, they have allowed him to add to it. He has spent, as you say, a lot of money on players, second only to Manchester City in the period in which Mourinho and Guardiola have been at the club at the same time. When they were appointed, those managers, they just finished the season level on points, the same number of wins, same number of draws, same number of defeats. They were absolutely equal at that stage. And yes, Manchester City, I think it's about £100 million net more than in transfer fees in Manchester United. But of course, there's the Sanchez swap and Ibrahimovic free transfer, which may have skewed that. But it's not just about, as you said, it's not just about the transfer fees, it's about the wages. Is it right that Manchester United have the highest wage bill in the Premier League?
Yeah. And what's also interesting was when...
And the second highest, third highest in Europe?
In Europe, that's right, yeah. What's interesting also, I think, with Manchester City is, yes, they have spent an awful lot of money, but they've hugely reduced the average age of the team. That team had reached the end of its sort of cycle, and I think they had to spend quite a bit of money. Obviously, Guardiola would demand it anyway, but they were letting players like Zabaleta go and Gaël Clichy go. So they were reducing the Yaya Toure, they were reducing the age of the squad. If you look at the Manchester United team, the core of that team is not what he inherited. It's not the players he's brought in. So he's not actually changed the profile of the team and reduced it. So you could say straight away that Manchester City have got more value in their squad because of what they've bought. And there's definitely a tension between Mourinho and the United board in that he seems to want to go for these older, more tried and tested players like Ivan Perisic for Inter Milan. Manchester United want younger players, and they keep pushing that. And obviously, the Anthony Martial thing is very interesting because he sort of gave up on Martial. Martial's still only 22. Manchester United don't want him to go anywhere. And I wrote my newspaper column today about Fred. And Fred is the 5th most expensive signing Manchester United have ever made. After the game yesterday, Mourinho's complaining that he had to play Fellaini rather than bring him on as a super sub because he had nobody else. You got Fred sitting on the bench. You know,
that's the whole thing with
marquee signing.
That's the whole thing with Mourinho, Jason, isn't it? I think basically he's not the coach that he was. I think that's glaringly obvious. He doesn't seem to be the personality that he was, and that personality would drag players with him. through a brick wall, which he famously did with Chelsea. You know, Lampard and Terry still eulogise about his managerial powers, and he does appear to have lost that. And we can also
or does he have the wrong players? But you talked about him being a particular type of coach.
Well, Rashford's not the wrong player, is he? Sanchez isn't the wrong player.
But
if he wrong player for Mourinho, maybe.
Well, what's the right player?
Well, defender. If he tries to, and I don't know what he's saying as well, he hasn't got that right.
No.
Jason, because that's what you've got to do. And I do believe, honestly, you do it day in, day out about defending as a four and being compact, and you can do it. But you don't get a look in if you're an attacking player. Mata, you know what a great player he is. When he comes on, he's effective. But he likes Fellaini. He likes him in both boxes. He's the best substitute in world football. He's the best plan B ever I've seen in world football, both for country and for club. Fellaini. You can play him anywhere, anytime, bring him on whether you're winning, bring him on whether you're losing.
Every manager he's had has loved him, haven't they?
Absolutely, because he affects the game. Because you can't change games when things are stale and he needs a goal. When he wants to tighten up, he'll bring him on. That's
not so much about coaching, though, is it? That's just Fellaini as a player. But, you know, the contrast with Guardiola is striking when you think of Raheem Sterling, how he's brought him on as a player. There's a number of performers in that City team that he's worked really hard on. They were good players to start off with, but things are happening at City that just aren't at United.
I think what's alarming them quite a lot at United is this sort of trend that seems to be emerging with him of bringing players in and then giving up on them. You know, and you're seeing that almost with Sanchez as well. You know, Sanchez has arrived, and now where is he in terms of the importance to the team? And there are stories that he wants to leave and that Mourinho's disenchanted with him.
Isn't that a bit of muddled thinking, do you think? Isn't that a muddled thinking on behalf of the coach? It's like, oh, that's not working, I'm going to go somewhere else.
I think what's happened is that he's gone in there, and he's obviously usually had a very, very, you know, quick impact, done very, very well, won trophies, which he did in his first year, and won the league in the second year. It's not happening now. And I think it's almost like he's accelerating that process, thinking, I've got to get this better, I've got to chop and change, I've got to get things moving here. Actually, he's probably better off, and he's talked a little bit about this recently, stepping back and thinking, this is going to take some time now. This is actually going to take some time now. I'm going to go with these younger players, I'm going to go with some of these players, and we're going to have to build slowly to try and catch Manchester City, because we're not going to do it the way I'm doing things at the moment.
He's never going to do that.
He can't think slowly. He's got to think now, 100 mile an hour, because as a coach and as a top coach, you need to make the bad players better, the average players good players, the good players very good players, and the very good players top players. Guardiola has that mentality, and he's made the really good players top quality players. You mentioned Sterling. He was
John Stones.
Yeah. You know, he's propelled them, so he's got the best out of every player at that football.
So does that tell you Mourinho's not a good coach anymore?
Correct.
Or a top coach?
He's not getting the best out of what he's got.
Is there also an argument, though, that the players that Manchester City were buying before Pep Guardiola arrived were Guardiola-type players, that there was actually a plan in place before Guardiola even got there?
Yeah, I mean, Guardiola's gone to Manchester City for a reason. It's not just the money. It's because, obviously, he's worked with Ferran Soriano and Tiki Begiristain before. He knew what the plan was at Manchester City. He knew what their approach was going to be. If you look at Manchester United, you don't quite know what they're trying to achieve, apart from just try and win, but we're not quite sure how they're trying to win. And in sort of sympathy to Mourinho, he has got a point when he talks about the club needing an overall overhaul. It needs a top to bottom overhaul of the club. They don't have the kind of director of football. They maybe not have the kind of scouting network they need. He's right in all of that. For a club of that stature, it's quite a little bit old-fashioned, really, which is probably still a legacy of having one manager there for so long.
Yeah, is that and then changing them in quick succession, relatively quick succession afterwards. Is that borne out by the signing since Sir Alex Ferguson left Manchester United? Because this isn't just a problem that's happened under Jose Mourinho. They brought in, Pogba's obviously the biggest of them, but also bringing in Di Maria. Mata came in, who's done well but hasn't been used.
It's easy to forget Mkhitaryan came and went, didn't he, without really kicking a ball in anger.
And Herrera came in.
Yeah, but you know, it's what Jason said. It doesn't seem to be a plan in place. It's kind of knee-jerk quite often with the signings and spending big.
In that case, does Mourinho have a defence, which is, you know, that this is a transfer policy that predates him.
But he's heavily involved in it. I mean, he's not, what always happens in these sort of scenarios is that the manager will try and distance himself from some of the players he's brought in, but he's brought these players in. There's no doubt about it that the likes of Fred and so on, Lukaku, Pogba, to a certain extent, was a club proposal, but he wanted him. There are Bailly. Eric Bailly is a really interesting case in point because he talked about Bailly becoming one of the best central defenders in the world, and now he doesn't want him anymore, or appears not to want him anymore. And so you can't disassociate yourself from the buying. They backed him in the transfer market 100%. They have definitely backed him.
But you can't trust his signings anymore. You look at Lukaku. He let him go at Chelsea, and yet he buys him back for 90 million. He didn't fancy him at Chelsea. He was out on loan on 2 or 3 occasions.
Scored a lot of goals last year.
At Everton?
No, for United.
No, United.
Oh, yeah, but a lot of goals, and he won. You've got to define a lot. He was scoring a lot of goals at Everton.
Bailly's an interesting one. That when he came into the United team, he was the man, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Whoa, look at this fellow. He's quick, sharp, determined, aggressive, and then he just gone downhill. So what's happened behind the scenes to make that occur?
Do you then understand the position of the board saying, OK, we're not going to bring in when Jose Mourinho infamously handed over the list in pre-season and said, these are the players that I want. Would you understand if the board said, actually, we've looked at the signings that have come in your tenure and we're not prepared to back you anymore? But equally, if they are going to do that, can you, under those circumstances, keep a manager? Yeah,
you've either got faith in your manager or you get rid of him, really. There's no in-betweens for me, and I suppose Mourinho feels that they don't really trust him. And in a way, you can't blame him for that, although obviously he's had loads of money to spend. He wanted another centre-half or two and they wouldn't allow him. And so he's thinking, well...
I think if they've got the biggest wage bill, though, presumably Mourinho's not involved in negotiating wages those kind of contracts,
he'll know roughly what the scale of... if you sign a player, you know roughly what the demands are going to be. I mean, he's not going to... if you're buying somebody for 50 million, he's not going to be on a low salary, is he? I mean, he's going to be coming in on big wages. So he'll know roughly what these players are going to be getting. And I think the centre-half thing it was a massive red flag in the summer. Once we knew that Manchester United were not going to sanction the signing of another centre-half, that's them saying, you've got to get on with what you've got. The line from the club was, what we're being asked to bring in isn't better than what we've got. Now, they've made that decision, and that's gone against the manager, hasn't it?
Because they've made a football decision.
Yeah, because their idea was, OK, if we can get Raphael Varane, fine, we'll buy him. But the players we're talking about bringing in aren't better than the ones we've already got. And that's their decision.
Well, does Ed Woodward know a centre-half?
Well, exactly. So who's saying that? Who's saying that? I don't know. But that's going against the manager effectively.
The Sanchez one is very interesting as well because he had the opportunity to go to Manchester City. And City were not going to be held to ransom by anybody. So they said, this is your value. This is what we value at. OK, you might be on a free, but I think at that time they would have had to pay a fee. But they said, no, you want too much money, you're going to be outpriced. But United took over that and give him, reportedly, $500,000 a week. It's not bad, is it?
Not playing like how he's playing.
Exactly. So you'd expect... So the board are saying, OK, you've got this guy and you got him for nothing and we agree because he was great at Arsenal. Where's it all gone wrong, Jose? You're giving him £500,000 a week. Surely you can make him into as good as he was at Arsenal, certainly not worse.
So overspending, spending unwisely?
Both?
Yeah, I think a bit of both, definitely. I just think there's no real strategy, and I think the club is guilty of that, but I think he has obviously played his part in it as well.